4 Charlie Delta, traffic's at your 2 o'clock and 2 miles still eastbound. Copy that now.
Welcome to our fourth Volaire airline industry update, brought to you, of course, by GenXI Productions. I'm Jack Penny. We have three big things we want to talk about this week. The first, U.S. Airlines and the Treasury Department, they have worked out their deal for aid under the CARES Act. We have the details on that. Also, the FAA has given all U.S. airports their aid numbers, but those numbers seem odd to some airport leadership, and we'll explain why. And we'll talk about why it's so difficult to forecast what demand is going to look like during the recovery period, and why you probably shouldn't trust every forecast that you see. First, though, a quick rundown of other news. North American capacity down 73%. That's through the end of May. Alaska and American have taken their cuts all the way into the beginning of June. May is a deeper cut than April in most cases. United and Delta appear to be rolling out cuts basically a week at a time in order to take pressure off reservation centers. International capacity down 92%. That's through the end of May. We really do believe domestic demand will come back before international demand. It's likely that borders will remain closed, especially to Americans due to the outbreak here. The U.S.-Canada border was supposed to reopen on April 19th. It will now likely stay closed until at least the middle of May. Now we do have the details on CARES Act funding for airlines in the U.S. 10 airlines right now, we're told, are working on agreements for funding. Some of those agreements are complete, and we already know what those look like. Each airline will get funds for basically 3/4 of their payroll cost for the entire year, but the catch really came over the weekend when we found out that 30% of the funding would be in the form of 10-year loans that the airlines will have to pay back. The other interesting piece of this is that the U.S. Treasury can take a stake in each airline that takes funding of between 1% and 3% ownership of that airline through stock purchases. We have detail for each airline. You'll continue to get that in your copy of Volaire Views.
Ordinance flat out of gate number 1.
We also have detail on how much in funding each airport in the U.S. is going to get from the CARES Act. U.S. airports getting $10 billion altogether, but it's broken down in a very specific way. 50% of the funding is based on an airport's share of employments based on the national total, and that's for 2018. 25% is based on the debt service that the airport still has to pay, and 25% is basically cash on hand against the debt service as a ratio. As a result, an airport that has more debt and has less cash gets a lot more money. For example, in Illinois, Decatur Airport is going to be getting $17+ million, while Champaign, Willard Airport, is only going to get $1.8 million. And finally this week, let's look ahead to recovery. That's the most common question we get from our airport clients. What does recovery look like? There are a lot of forecasts out there, and most are pretty gloomy. And that's because they all rely upon one factor. That is fear. They rely upon consumer fear to forecast what demand is going to look like. People are afraid of getting sick. They're afraid the economy is not going to work out for them, or they're afraid they're going to get stuck somewhere. You know, forecasts, though, they might be overplaying that fear, at least in the short term. Here in Oregon, day 33 today of our shelter in place, and yet we had great weather over the weekend, and parks in Portland were packed. People were out playing volleyball. They were having cookouts. Now, to be clear, that's an absolutely terrible idea right now. You should not be doing that. But that shows us there is a subset of people who are not afraid. They're not afraid of getting sick, and they're not afraid of being out in the world, even with shelter-in-place orders still in effect. It's likely that those people, we don't know exactly how many of them there are, but those people are the ones who will be the first ones back on airplanes. They're the ones who are going to take advantage of the great fare deals that we see there. So they are the creators of pent-up demand. And so it's likely that recovery is going to come in a couple of waves. The first will be when shelter in place is lifted across pockets of the country. We'll see demand increase because those very people will say, hey, it's safe for me now. I'm not worried about getting sick. I'm going to travel. And we'll see a boost pretty quickly out of the gate. There is a likelihood of this. It's not for sure, but it is conceivable. Now, how long that pent-up demand lasts, that is the question. And if it only lasts for a short period, a month or 2 months, we could have relatively full flights with constrained capacity for that period. But how long is it going to take for fundamental demand to return? That's your business traveler, that's your visiting friends and relative traveler, or your leisure traveler who's maybe taking a trip to Europe. That demand is going to take a lot longer to return. We're thinking multiple steps to recovery. A quick recovery with pent-up demand, lower traffic again until fundamental demand returns over many, many, many months. In the end, it's just very difficult to forecast. We're going to continue to refine our thoughts, and we'll give them to you as frequently as we can. Thanks for watching again this week.